everyone, so today we're going to talk about getting your dog used to their harness. So lots of dogs can be a little bit sensitive with their walking tools, especially something like a harness that needs to go over their head. Wrigley here in particular is not so fond of things going over her head. But once she gets the harness on, she's totally fine. A lot of dogs are just like this. So I'm going to walk you through how to get your dog more comfortable with their harness. So here I just am starting with the harness on the floor. I'm not even touching it. And I'm starting with putting treats next to the harness and then kind of advancing to, can you go investigate the harness? And then treats will appear. Now what I'm doing here is I just want Wrigley to investigate the harness. She's coming over to touch it with her nose and all of a sudden a treat appears for her doing that. And I am using a verbal marker yes in place of the click for this one because the click can be a little loud right next to your dog's head and I don't want to spook her at all. So every time she goes to touch that harness with her nose, I say yes and then toss her a treat. The other thing you can incorporate into this is actually cueing your dog to touch the harness if your dog does know a touch cue.
Touch. Touch. Yes.
For a lot of dogs, the sound of the harness can actually be the scariest thing. So Wrigley is very close to the harness, as you can see right now. The sound of the buckle closing doesn't bother her at all, but I know lots of dogs that are a little bit more sensitive to this. So if your dog is close to the harness and they are sound sensitive, I would suggest tossing a treat away first and then buckling it as they're coming back, but they're still far away from the harness. And then as soon as you buckle it, I follow that with a yes and a treat. I find that a lot of dogs that have issues with the harness going on is that they are also a little bit sensitive to touch in those particular areas. So I would go ahead and practice this with your dog with just reaching towards them, follow that with a treat. I'm practicing with touching Wrigley on her side, over her head, on her chest, areas that the harness is going to sit, and motions that I'm going to be making while I'm putting the harness on her. So I'm just going to reach out towards her, touch her head for a second, then say yes and follow that with a treat. I just want to condition her to think that me touching her and me making those motions are actually really positive things for her. So now we are moving on and going on to getting your dog to put their head through the harness. Now the goal here is I want Wrigley to put her head through the harness, not me put the harness through her head. There's a big difference there. I want her to do the action herself and me not force it on her. So what I'm starting with here is just sticking my hand through the harness and getting her used to taking treats through the harness. I'm starting out further away, and then as she gets more comfortable, I'm asking her to put her head just a little bit further through it using a food lure for this one. The touch cue is also a great one to get your dog to touch your hand through the harness as well, encouraging them to stick their nose through it. So I'm just presenting that touch cue on the other side of the harness and rewarding Wrigley for touching my hand at first, and then I'll advance over to putting it all the way over her head. Once she's comfortable with taking food through the harness, I'm starting to ask her to put her head through it, and then I'm making more advancements once she offers that head through motion of me moving the harness further down her neck. Now, she is a little bit uncomfortable at first with this. This is the part that Wrigley does not like about the harness, so we're working through it. Now the important part here is I am presenting my hand first so she can take the treat and then moving the harness up over her head. I'm not doing it at the same time because that'll just cause her to back up and not really trust the harness anymore. Once she's doing well with that, I'm actually holding the harness up for her and then waiting for her to stick her nose through it. That is a cue to me that she is ready to have the harness put on her, and then I will advance with putting it further down her neck. When I'm ready to take the harness off, she also gets a treat for that. This is a really important piece to see here. Wrigley is very uncomfortable at this point. At home, when you guys are practicing this, don't have your dog on leash and don't force them to keep training with you. She is clearly in need of a break here, so she takes her time and goes to sniff around. She eventually will come back to me. If she wants to engage with me, she will, and I'm just gonna wait her out and jackpot reward that response that I wanted from her. But take it slow with your dogs. If you're noticing those uncomfortable signals that it looks like they're blowing you off, they're probably just stressed out, so go ahead and give them a break when needed. Now here we're advancing to actually putting the harness on her. So this is after quite a bit of practice, a couple sessions worth of practice really. And she is offering that behavior of putting her head through. You can tell she still doesn't like it that much, but she's doing much better with it now. And what I'm doing is distracting her by holding a treat out for her to munch on and then reaching around and grabbing the straps and clipping them together. Now again, for a lot of dogs, this can be a really uncomfortable step. If your dog is uncomfortable with this step, what I'd recommend is have one hand feeding your dog treats as you're clipping the buckles with your other hand. Other option to do this to free up both hands is take a handful of treats, scatter them on the floor in front of your dog. Let your dog eat those treats while you reach for their buckles to clip the sides together. After you get your harness on your dog, now is a great opportunity to get them really comfortable with it. This is great for puppies as well that aren't used to the sensation of wearing a harness. Playing games like Ready, Find It, I'm just tossing treats for Wrigley to go run and get. This is one of her favorite games. You can play fetch with your dog during this time. They can eat their dinner. But having your dog get comfortable wearing the harness around the house before you even put a leash on it outside can be a really good way to get your dog used to it.